afternoon, and welcome to another episode of the Pitcher Perfect podcast. I am your host, Kat Osterman, with my co-host here, Holly Pierce. We are excited to bring you another episode all about things pitching. We are over 20 episodes in. Continue to try to find space to bring this to you guys as we have gotten so much good feedback. We enjoy interacting with all of you guys. So continue to drop your comments. If you see us, flag us down. Let us know how much you enjoy the podcast. Keep listening, share all the things. We are excited, as always, to be partnered with Tie It Yourself Hair Ties. They have all the colors, all the things to make your ponytail, your braids, you name it, creative. You can use our code Pitcher Perfect Podcast at checkout for a discount. But we are excited they jumped on board. We got to meet them, I think we mentioned, in the fall out in Clearwater. So it was fun to finally put names and faces together and all the things. But been a lot of good feedback and interaction between their site and our podcast. So we're so excited about that as always. But today's topic comes from a lot of conversations Holly and I have. I'll let her touch on that here in just a second. But this is for players and parents alike. And really, parents, we are going to try to help you understand how to be the best for your athlete. What does your athlete need? How can you help nurture that? Those of you that listened to the episode with my dad, he touched a little bit on how they were with me and my upbringing. And I actually just did a speaking engagement this week, and I prefaced it with, when I speak, I don't have a adversity story to overcome really. I had a couple, like I didn't get chosen for the team stories, but those aren't the same. And then I said, and this other side is like, I didn't have limited access. Like, I'm very aware of the fact that I was given what I needed to be given. But on the emotional and mental side, I think I benefited from having parents that probably handled things almost as perfectly as you can. I've mentioned a few times, I don't have a lot of the terrible car ride stories home. And so parents, we're going to try to talk to you guys today about how the combos in different aspects, different situations should go with your athletes or your pitchers specifically. And I'm going to go ahead and let Holly kick this one off, as this was started all from conversations she had been having with parents.
Yeah, I've had a lot of conversations with parents lately. I've posted a few things on the range that has gotten tremendous engagement and feedback over the last couple weeks. So that to me told me this is something that people want to hear, and that I'm glad that parents want advice and feedback about basically just being the best you can for your athlete, like how to support them in the right types of ways. I think that ultimately 99% of parents are well-intended, just like coaches. They're well-intended, but maybe they don't know how. They think about that they're going about things the right way. And then ultimately, they're kind of creating unintended issues or confidence issues or athletes that are kind of focused on things that aren't benefiting them. And it's not done on purpose. It's just most of us as parents, you and I the same, we're going through this for the first time. And being a parent's tough, and you want to support your daughter. You want to be the best you can for her. I think that for me, like my daughter, both of our daughters are young, right? So we haven't necessarily, we're going through it, the parenting thing right now at the younger levels, but we've also coached and worked with athletes and been athletes and seen the ones that get to a certain point and they do have kind of mental obstacles that resulted in maybe years of the wrong types of conversations, the wrong types of support that weren't intended to be wrong, but parents just didn't know each other any better, right? I saw this, I just sent Kat this video. If you have an opportunity to go back and look, there's a video by Eileen Gu. She's an Chinese-American free skier. She skis for China, but she's so articulate. So many of her interviews are great, but she was talking about neuroplasticity. And I know that that's a big word, so I'll break it down. But basically, it's basically like how our brains are wired and how we have the ability to wire our brains the way that we want them. And how we think ultimately, or what we think leads to how we think, which leads to who we are. And I think parents play a really big role in that. Is we're teaching our athletes how to think, what to think, and ultimately who they become by the way that we talk to them and the conversations we have on game rides home and the things that we place importance on or prioritize. And like I said, I can't stress this enough. It's not like it's ill-intended or bad intended, but a lot of times it's just, not really knowing any better. And I would say the first thing is just to be a parent first, support your daughter in the best way that you can as a person first, and then sports is secondary. And there's so many things that we can learn from sports, and it's so character building. But making sure that we're not so focused on results or playing time or things like that, that we forget that these are young kids going through this for the first time, and they ultimately just need our love and support, whether on the field or not. It breaks my heart when I see parents that don't go to games if their kid's not starting. And I know it's tough, like, people are working, it's tough to get out to games and stuff like that, but I've definitely experienced situations where there's parents that, if their kid's not starting or they're not in like a pivotal role on the field, that they're not out there at the field supporting them. And to me, like, as an athlete, the games that I wasn't playing or the toughest times, that's when I needed my parents there the most. Like, I wanted to know that they supported me regardless of whether or not I was on the field, regardless of whether or not I was doing well, that they were going to be there and they were going to have my back, and they still loved me at the end of the day. And I think that that car ride home too is a really good opportunity just to show support. It doesn't have to be a "what did you do wrong? Let's rehash the whole game." It can just be, "You had a tough day. Like, we can talk about it when you're ready. I love you. I support you. We'll get back after it tomorrow. We can go to work. I'm here to do whatever you need me for." But I think one of the biggest things too is for parents to ask their athletes, like, "What do you need from me? How can I support you better?" Open up those conversations and ask your athlete what you need to feel supported, especially in this moment. Are you okay? Are you okay? Like, are you doing okay? Are you happy? Is everything going all right? Like, do you need to talk about it? But for them to know that there's an open door there, that you're going to love them as the person and the young woman that they are beyond just the athlete. And you're always there to support them as a person first.
Yeah. I think that's the huge thing is remembering keep saying the person they are, but they are a human trying to play a sport and they are human trying to do one of the most difficult tasks in all of athletics. And when you keep that in mind, keep in mind they're human. So they're not trying to give up hits. They're not trying to give up walks. Like no one tries to be bad at what you're attempting to do. And I think a lot of times, yes, as parents, you want to see them succeed. You want to see the process come to fruition. You want to be able to, yes, brag on Katie and Sally and Lacey and like just how good they are. But at the same time, it looks different for everybody. The process to success looks different from everybody. So your athlete's journey and your relationship with them is just yours. So Katie might be accelerating and getting successful, at 14, and Sally may not. She may maybe she's hitting a plateau in the success climb. But don't compare what one's doing to your daughter and then that's going to dictate the conversations you have in the car ride because Katie was 3 for 4 and hit 2 doubles and you were 2 for 3, but you had a bunt and an infield hit. Like don't play the comparison game. And I think the other thing you hit on that I like is like ask your athlete what they need. And I think my dad and I talked about it in our episode, but there was a time where I lost an extra inning game. And again, we bring we bring up the OG bat busters with Hanning, but we lost to Hanning's team in extra innings by 1 run. I was absolutely distraught. I came off the field and my dad gave me a hug and all I could say is like, I need another pitch. They knew, by the eighth, ninth inning, a Risewell was coming and they were ready for it. And it's not like they tattooed it for a home run. They just were able to adjust and get 1 run across, however that was. And I want to say it might have been a bloop single or a sac fly. I don't know. But needless to say, here I am like critiquing an absolutely great performance because of the outcome. And at that moment, I remember he just hugged me and he said, "You're not wrong, but you need to realize what you just did." And so
Balance.
it was hey, I hear you, but we're not going to harp on what we need to do or what could have changed the outcome of the game. I'm going to remind you what you just did. And you just held a team full of junior Olympians, junior national team members, going to all the Power Fives, all the big pack schools at the time, all the things. You just held them to 1 or 2 runs through 8 innings. Like that's pretty good. So I think the other piece on top of that is like keep reality in perspective too. So quickly all the time we want to figure out what could be better or what was, I think I've talked about I grade, and a lot of my athletes that I've worked with now will grade their performance like A through F, basically like you're in school. Very rarely do we have anything below a C. Otherwise, I mean, if you're throwing a D or F game, most of the time your coach doesn't leave you out there. So
Hopefully.
But I don't ask that right away when I talk to them. Even now, I have a few that are in college that'll call me or text me after games, especially hard ones. And it'll be like, okay, so how would you grade? Like, we talk about it. I let them vent. I a lot of times talk about, I ask the questions of like, how'd you feel? How is our mentality? How is our focus? Like the things that, we control. And then I'll be like, okay, where do you grade? Where do you grade yourself today? And that's when you can go into what could be better. But you have to know that your athlete's ready to have that conversation. Post game, when it's hard, they already feel like they let down their team, their coach, probably thinking they let you down, which is the worst thing ever because as a parent, you shouldn't love them any less because they will lose a ball game. So they already have all these feelings of letting people down. Not to mention if they're thinking about, well, I worked so hard and it didn't pay off. Like, am I cut out to do this? There's just everything creeps in when you have a bad game. There's very few that can say, well, today was just a bad day. I'll go back out tomorrow and it'll be better. Like as they get older, you hope they can do that. But when they're young, they can't. So it's a matter of reminding them. And I love this. Abby Wambach said it on her podcast is her kids that she shares with Glennon is some of the first things they say when they come off the field. And I think they were playing soccer, which, I mean, how do you go play soccer when Abby Wambach's your stepmom, right? But the first thing she says when they come off is, I love watching you play. Like, I love watching you play. And when they're ready to talk about soccer, she'll talk soccer with them. But she's not expecting them to be her. And I
Yep.
think we shouldn't expect them to be more than who they are right now. And I think that's where a lot of the harsher conversations come in is because there's this ideal or someone told you there's potential or you have this goal in mind. There's a lot of 10-year-olds that, yes, start playing right now because they want to go to college and play softball because it's on TV all the time. You and I
Right.
didn't get to have that goal as a 10-year-old because we didn't really know what was in
Yeah, we
existence,
didn't think.
right? But as a 10-year-old, you're not treating them like they're a college softball player. There's a lot of growth to happen in between there. So while this might be the big, giant golden egg that you're getting at the end of the hunt, like you still got to treat them like a 10-year-old. You can't be
Yeah.
like, no, you can't walk 8 people in a game if you want to go to college. No, when you're 16 and 18, you can't walk eight in a game and think you're going to go to college. When you're in 10, you can absolutely walk 8 in a game and
Yeah.
still have a, a good shot at going to college. So I think some of it is realizing and meeting them exactly where they are. But I've said a number of times, and I think my dad talked about it. We didn't have the knockout, drag out post-game car rides. I laughed because while you were talking, I thought about it. And most of our arguments, and our neighbors can attest, were during practice sessions. Like they would hear us yelling at each other in the middle of practice sessions, probably because I thought a pitch was good and he wanted it to be this much better. And while it frustrated me and I yelled because I had very not great temper control as a young athlete, we argued more there. But then I think about it and I'm like, but that's where I would rather argue because he's going to get his point across of, hey, I'm wanting it to be this specific because X, Y, and Z happens when your spin is here versus here or here versus here. Like, or I'll mess up a pitch and he'll do something funky and he'll be like, can you try that again? I'm like, what are you talking about? That wasn't even where we were trying to throw it. And he's like, no, but you did something. Can we try, so you almost want the resistance if there's going to be any, because let's be real, there's going to be some bickering. It
Yeah.
happens, but
Especially
you
when
want
you're
it
a teenager.
to be in the moments that you're working on it, not the moments you're performing it and not the moments right after the performance to where it's either A, going to negatively affect them, B, go one ear and out the other so they're not even going to hear it, and C, they're going to get home and not want to talk to you. You don't want to be the person that they think is going to constantly tear them down when they're already tearing themselves down. So I think the biggest thing, and I always liked in the car rides, is, he didn't really ask me what I needed from him. It was just, and if my mom came usually my mom came in a separate car because my dad helped coach. So like we went an hour earlier, but my mom most of the time would know, like, I'm riding home with dad, to be able to talk it out. And we would ride for a little bit. We'd stop and get my cherry Coke and chili cheese Fritos snack. And then we'd start to talk about it. And he would just start, but he almost always started with, you did this well. And I would be like, yeah. And then normally I would say, but like this and this didn't work. And there were times that, he had to point out, like, that's just the nature of the game. And then there were other times where he'd be like, well, it is your fourth game this weekend. Were you feeling tired? Did you feel like your arm speed was up? Like, what were you feeling? He wouldn't tell me like, hey, I saw a slow arm. I saw you not using your legs. Like, he got me thinking about my pitching. Which I think that's key, is ask the questions that lead your pitcher to think about their own craft.
Yes, yes.
Because if you come out and just tell them your posture was bad, your release was too late, like then they aren't trying to think and feel what's going on in order to
Right.
fix. And so, and you and I have talked about this with pitching coaches, is like we are, and I'm guilty of it. So I am not pointing the finger at everyone without pointing it back at myself. Is I'm a lot of times guilty of telling them what went wrong on every pitch. And it wasn't until we did one of those, like, how do they learn kind of thing, testing things, that one of my pitchers, it was like she scored very low on whatever was going to dictate in-game adjustments with herself. And so I sat there and I was like, how do I help her with that? So instead of telling her what went wrong, I would start to ask after a bad pitch, what did you feel? Or what do you think happened? And she would have to start feeling what she felt, but also start thinking about, if I threw a curveball high in the past, what were the corrections we did? Which one of those do I feel like probably could have applied to that pitch? And now so now a lot of times, she'll still come to me for tune-ups on Christmas breaks. She's in college, but now she'll be able to tell me, like, hey, this is what happened.
Yeah.
And so I think that's been the cool thing. But I think as a parent, if you can start to cultivate to them, and again, when they're like 8, 9, 10, yes, you want them to feel, but sometimes you have to tell them because they don't feel that they're like a little teapot tipping
Yeah.
forward.
They're learning for the first time.
But if you can try, like, hey, did you feel when you were throwing it low that you were leaning forward? And they can kind of think back, oh, well, maybe a little bit, but like cultivate the questions once you're starting to talk about softball, to getting them to think about their performance. And I say that on a good performance too. Like, you win a ball game and throw a 2-hitter, like, hey, how are you feeling today? And more than good, like, how were you feeling? Were they fresh? Or
Right.
hell, they might tell you, you know what, I'm tired, but mentally, I really wanted to win that game. So I just made myself push through. And then I think the other piece is ask the questions that help them not win games, but get better at their craft. And this
Yes.
is where we've talked about competitive pitches. When I get some of my parents focused on, like, is she throwing competitive pitches versus we had 4 walks. Okay, if we had 4 walks and it's a 12 pitch at bat and after 8 foul balls, we try to sneak a rise ball in and it doesn't work, like, okay, so be it.
Yeah.
Tip your hat. Now, granted, you don't
Yeah.
usually have 4 walks that look like that, but if you play an 8-inning game, you might. And heck, you might intentionally walk somebody in there, which is fine. But like, what determines, and this is where another conversation at some point, as you guys, as parents and kids have these conversations as careers go on, is what is the standard? And it doesn't have to be exact numbers, but what is the standard you're going for? Is it by the naked eye? If a dad's watching his daughter throw, is it by the naked eye that 80% of the pitches are competitive?
Yeah.
Maybe. Is it, it's not a certain number of strikeouts, a certain number of hits, a certain number of walks. Like, what is the standard when you guys watch? And then the other piece is, like, if they win without living up to the standard, then props to them, because something in here facilitated it. So don't get mad. Like, if they win a game pitching ugly, again, let them talk about it, because at some point they'll come back and be like, yeah, I won that game, but it was pretty bad, wasn't it? Like,
Yeah.
it's there. They're not unrealistic, but I think a lot of self-doubt is created because parents don't meet them where they are now. They meet them at this unrealistic goal that they're not there yet.
Right. Yeah. You said so many good things there. And I think one of the things, first of all, asking the questions and making sure it's a conversation and it's not let me tell you what I think as a parent, let me tell you how I think you could have done better. But it's a two-way conversation, because ultimately we want to build thinkers, right? We're building up athletes, but we're also building up human beings, like we said, and we want to build thinkers. And sometimes when we step back, we allow them to step up. And sometimes stepping back is just asking a question and waiting for a response. And like I said, having it be a two-way conversation, but even, not focusing so much on the results, but we say this in the range all the time, that even when a pitcher gets beat on a pitch, ask your pitcher, like, okay, so, on that one home run, what were you trying to do right there? And she may come back and say, well, it was 0-2 and I was trying to get the ball out of the zone and I just missed. And it's like, okay, yeah, she had the right thought process. Like, it was 0-2. She knew she had to get the ball out of the zone, or, it was, I was it was a full count or I was behind in the count and I was trying to just get a strike on the corner and I brought a little bit too far over the plate. And it's like, okay, that's a good answer. She was thinking, she was trying to do something. The result isn't always it's like it doesn't mean that they didn't know what they were supposed to do on that. It's just sometimes our body doesn't always follow suit, and it's like we don't have to get angry with them because our body didn't do what we were trying to get it to do when the thought process was there. They know the game. They're trying to execute a pitch and it just wasn't executed, and it's like, okay, you know what? I'm proud of you. That was you had the right thought process there. That was awesome. You're trying to work out of the count or out of the zone on 0 and 2. Like, I'm proud of you for that. That's awesome. But creating thinkers, like I said, and that happens when you engage them in conversations. And the other part of that too, though, beyond just the conversations we have, is to remember that our athletes are sponges, and even the things that we don't necessarily say to them, they're going to soak up when they hear things that we say, maybe to other people or to the other parent or to another parent on the team, or what are we reactive to. And I
Yeah.
think that that's something that I think all parents can be a little bit better or more conscious of, is like when our athlete gives up a hit, it's second nature for most athletes until they're trained not to, that they're going to look over and see what their parents' reaction is. So if you're throwing up your arms when our athlete gives up and hit, or you're looking super tense in a full count, how are they supposed to be relaxed and confident in a full count when you're like this? Or I've seen I had a coach one time actually who, it was like full count, bases loaded, and I looked over into the dugout and she had her back turned to the field because she was so nervous. I'm like, how am I supposed to be confident in this pitch when you clearly are like not confident in me? Not that I need somebody else to be confident for me to be confident, but again, we're talking about adolescents who are learning, right? So
Right.
just remember that what you're reactive to as a parent, what you get worked up about, they're feeling your energy and they're seeing you and they're seeing you pacing, in big moments, in big games. And if you're pacing behind the backstop or pacing in the outfield, they're noticing those things. And
Yes.
so ultimately, if we want our athletes to be calm in big moments, we need to exhibit calmness in big moments. And it may not feel natural on the inside. As a parent, I may be nervous as heck, but to be aware that we're not exhibiting that and showing that to our athlete anything
Right.
more than, you got this. Like, I'm calm because I know she can handle this and she's ready for this. But, and also with stats. So I talked about it a little bit with you yesterday, but I'm not saying the stats are not, I think they tell a story, that they're not a bad thing necessarily, but especially when you're older or you're working on something, your numbers can reflect progress.
Yep.
You've been working and your numbers are reflecting that. But obsessing over numbers is a black hole that sometimes there is no coming back from for athletes. And
Correct.
that really does sometimes start at home, especially at the younger ages. That Look, I can't tell parents not to go on Game Changer and look at stats because that's unrealistic. They're going to do it, right? You're going to do it. I
Right.
look at them. But one thing I don't do is I do not share them with my child and I do not talk about them. So while I may look just out of curiosity, I'm not talking to my 9-year-old about her ERA or her batting average. That's just, you're building them up in a way at 9, 10 years old when you're talking about them to them become hyper aware and eventually playing to a point where they don't want to mess up because they don't want their ERA to drop. I don't know if you've ever been there. I've been there in college where, my ERA was sitting at a pretty good number. And then during games, if I gave up a run, that did creep into my mind thinking, "Ugh, I wonder
Mhm.
what this is gonna do to my ERA." And it's like,
Mhm.
you shouldn't be thinking about that during
Right.
performance, right? And it's like, or even as a batter, it's like, my batting average is pretty good right now. Like, I've got the highest batting average on the team and I'm aware of it. And then I strike out twice. Now I gotta go up to my third at bat, and all I'm thinking about is, I wonder how much that dropped my batting average, this game. And that's not something that we should be thinking about in performance. Like I said, take everything with a grain of salt. I'm not saying numbers are a bad thing necessarily. They tell a story, right? But especially at the younger ages, as a parent, if you're going to look at Game Changer or whatever the stats are, do not talk about it in front of your athlete, please, and do not share it with your athlete. Because again, going back to what Eileen Gu said in the beginning, like, we're training them what to think, how to think, ultimately who to be. And if we're training them at 9, 10, 11 years old to think about results and numbers, that's going to live with them.
Yeah.
And that is not the way to build up athletes that are focused on the process and getting better and competing in the moment. We're building up athletes who are tense and afraid to mess up because they don't want that stat line to drop.
Right. Yeah. And I think like numbers never tell the whole story,
Very
right?
true.
And so like I'll go so far as last weekend I was calling a game for UTSA and they had a pitcher. She threw phenomenal. Drop ball pitcher, spotting things in and out, mixing speeds. It was her longest outing of the year. She got through 7. They were tied 1-1, I think. Started the 8th. I could kind of start telling she was start laboring a little bit. Like again, longest outing of the year, right? I don't think she had thrown past 2, maybe 3 innings prior to this outing. But she's throwing great. Ends up putting some runners on. The person who comes in gives up a run. They get out of it. They end up losing. Now you can look at that and be like, well, we lost. And yes, I put these runners on in the 8th. Or you can look at it and be like, man, for 7 innings, I threw really good. And there were a couple situations where it wasn't necessarily an error, but someone might have been able to make a play,
Yeah.
right? Or a mental lapse caused a play not to fold in her favor. And so at the end of the day, you look at it, the earn runs are there, but one play they could not be there. So if
Yeah.
you get stuck in these numbers, this 7 inning game that actually was really, really well pitched by this kid should go down as a really, really well pitched game by that kid. And I really hope, I don't know what happened when she called mom and dad after the game or whatever, but I really hope when she did, they were really proud of her because while I was calling the game, I was really proud of the kid because I was just like getting out of jams, executing when she needed to. Presence on the mound was great. Like everything was almost an A plus. I hate to say it got wasted, but I mean, it didn't necessarily get wasted, but it didn't result in a win. And it's really easy to look at that and go back and be like, oh, well, what could you have done different? You're going to give up runs. Like, to be
Right.
honest, a lot of times we say 3 or less is the goal. Like, I don't really even like 3, but to be honest, 3 or less is a really good goal for a pitcher to keep in a full game. Now, not in
Realistic.
like 1 inning, but a full game. Once you're 16, 18, maybe even 14 if you're an elite 14. 10s, 11s, 12s, that's like unrealistic because you still are learning how to throw, play catch, all the things. If we go on numbers, 1 or 2, 3 runs in a game can change your ERA. But at the same time, or you could look at it and be like, that 7 inning game just gave me a hell of a lot of confidence because I executed. I got us out of a bases loaded jam. I got a ground ball double play. I struck out a big hitter when it mattered. And we often forget the positive pieces that you need to build your confidence on. So even if it's not a pretty, even if it's not a pretty loss, but let's say in a 2 on 1 out situation, the best hitter comes up and she strikes her out or gets a weak pop up to the infield or something easy. I mean, for me, I remember the first time I faced Veronica Nelson. We got her to ground out shortstop 3 times. Did not care that I didn't strike her out. We got her out. Check. Positive. Let's move on.
Ronnie Nelson.
Like if they get somebody out, somebody big out in a big moment, that should be a confidence builder and that should be something you touch on later. The stats, while yes, they matter to a certain extent, there should be like checkpoints where you go into it. And if you go, your 16, 18-year-old daughter, and I say because I think they're better emotionally equipped to handle stats by that point. I mean, you're usually seeing them in high school. So at that point, they're seeing them broadcasted by different social media outlets. But there should also be like after a weekend or after the tournament season before district starts, or in our case, like pre-Colorado, Colorado, and nationals. Like, because I don't really care what your ERA is. Really, before Colorado, it's probably great. After Colorado, we're probably thinking we are not very good. Then we
Yeah.
go to nationals and we're fine. So it's like there's always a fluctuation. And what it really matters is, are you getting better at your craft to be really good at the peak part of season? So for us, nationals. For college, obviously postseason, or really conference. So that way they can make a run and then you try to keep that peak as long as possible in the postseason. But I think parents, you guys facilitate the way they think, and you can facilitate the way they think at a really young age by making sure you ask the questions that make them think about their performance first, as opposed to telling them what you saw them do wrong. Now, I think you should absolutely start every conversation. I love watching you play and tell them the positives that you did see. So if she threw great before you want to ask her how she felt. Hey, that was a great game, baby. Like you got out of a bases loaded jam, like blah, 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 yada, yada. I was so proud of you. How'd you feel out there today? Like you're going to get a different kid as opposed to the one that gets in the car and gets the, what were you thinking? Blah, blah, blah. Like just remember none of us, we're never trying to give up home runs and not be good.
Yeah.
And I think that's the biggest thing is cultivate them thinking about their pitching, try to err on the positive side. And then when they're ready to actually talk about how do I get better? And I think that's the thing. Hey, let me know when you want to talk about it. And my boss, Scott Smith, he talks about it all the time. He coached his daughter. And there was a time where she got in the car and she's like, I need you to be dad right now and not coach.
Yeah.
And so he took a step back. And so he started being dad in the car. And eventually, either in the car ride or when they got home, she would process and then come back and be like, okay, my second at bat, I needed to do whatever.
Yeah.
Because your athlete wants to get better. And so eventually there will be the conversation on how do I get better? And then like I said, let the resistance or the bickering or whatever, let it happen while y'all are working because you're working towards something at that point. And I'm not saying every practice you should be biting each other's heads off, but like if she thinks she threw a good pitch, and it might be a good pitch and you might think it is, but it's not what you wanted. And it's like, hey, yeah. And I tell pitchers all the time, sometimes that's a great 1-1 pitch. Not what we were practicing right now. I asked you to throw it with good spin, tight, and up here at the head. So
Yeah.
that's the goal right now. So no, this one down here, while it's not a bad pitch, it doesn't count. We're working right
Right.
here. And so I think, let the resistance of figuring out how to be better happen while y'all are working on it, as opposed to right after something that they already feel bad about themselves.
And I would say also to that point about the resistance piece during practice is that, you touched on something earlier. You said the phrase like in one ear and out the other sometimes. And I think that's a really important thing that, it's not always about being right or what you say, but it's how you say it because we want our athlete, our daughter, or someone we're coaching, we want it to land. We want them to hear it, right? So if it's not if there's too much resistance because we're not conveying the message in a way that they're hearing it, then it doesn't matter what we're saying really because they're not hearing it. So just making sure it's accountability is not a bad thing, especially, in practice. Like there
Mhm.
needs to be accountability in practice. But the way that we speak to our daughter and our athlete, it's not gentle parenting. It's like ensuring that they're hearing what we're saying, right? And that
Right.
they're able to get better in that moment, that they're not shutting down to the point that now they're in a worse place. And that's not what we intended for to happen, right? We actually have some good points. Your dad, he knows what he's talking about. But
Right.
had it been a dynamic where you weren't hearing him or weren't able to hear him and there wasn't the kind of healthy dynamic that it was actually making you better, it doesn't really matter how much that parent knows.
Parents, you are so critical. You're the backbone for your athlete. If you haven't seen the clip by Eileen Gu, go find it. But you can just tell how articulate and how positive she is. Some of that has to be her upbringing and the
I'm
fact
sure.
that she
Yeah.
knows, every day she gets a chance to go do a new run and improve. And it's the same way in pitching and softball. It's like every day I tell my kids, the sun still comes up tomorrow. It's a quote John Rittman told me at one point with the national team, but the sun still comes up tomorrow. So you get another chance at it. And then I think the other piece we have to remember is like, well, yes, we're trying to use this to possibly go to college and maybe a career beyond. It's still a game. It's not life or death. It's not, emptying it shouldn't impact their overall well-being for long term. Like short term, yes, they're going to be upset, but as parents remind them that it's still a game. It's supposed to be fun. Yes, they can get better at it, but let's cultivate the mindset of being able to sit in our loss and then have our constructive conversations. And again, last piece, I think you said it at the beginning. They're human. They're people.
Yep. So as we college seasons are kicking off, the little kids rec seasons are kicking off. We're going to be kicking off travel ball here in a few short months. I think that's going to come up really fast, but hopefully you can take even one piece of advice from this conversation and help build an even stronger relationship with your daughters. And I'm sure anybody who's listening, any parent who's listening, if you're tuning into this podcast, I would say you're already ahead of the game because you're trying to learn. So, and that's all we can all do is just like you said, sun comes up tomorrow. We can all be better athletes, better people, better parents, more supportive parents. But thank you. We appreciate you guys for tuning in. Thank you so much for all of the feedback, and we will see you guys next week. And in the meantime, hit up TIYproducts.com and use our promo code Picture Perfect Podcast for a discount and get your daughter styling and her hair styling for the season.
See you guys
And
next
that's it.
time.
Bye, guys.